Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, visitors, and guests. It's my privilege to introduce Danene Sorace today. I'm not going to belabor the details of her biography. You have that at your table. I'll just say that I've had the pleasure of knowing Danene for a while. I was happy to support her in her campaign for mayor, and I'm thrilled to have her as our mayor. And what I would just sort of say in the way of an introduction is, as I've gotten to interact with her since she's been mayor and seen her really confronted with some really difficult decisions very early in her term. What I've seen with Danene is that she really has a passion and a great deal of concern for the people that live in this city and for the health of our community, and some of the really difficult decisions that have faced her. I've heard her talk about these things, and you can see firsthand that these things impact her in a very personal way. She has a very, very deep concern for the people who live here, and she's making decisions based on the best thing that she knows is right for the people that live here, not out of any other particular external interest. So it's my pleasure to introduce Danene and let her tell us about what she is working on as mayor.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really so much more relaxing to be here as the mayor and not a candidate. So thank you. I really did eat my lunch today, so I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the time to be with you all today, and I'm going to share a little bit about the priorities that I've identified for my administration, talk about some of the status updates, and the question that was asked to me as we were preparing for today was, some of the challenges and surprises since I've been in office for about 7 months. So I can talk about those things, and also I thought I'd just share a little bit about my own personal reflections on the role of mayor and some of the things that I've observed thus far. So that's what I've laid out. We will have about 15-20 minutes for questions, so I would welcome them. So January 3rd, I am sworn in to office, and I immediately dig in. There was a lot for me to learn in terms of the transition. I naively believed that serving 4 years on council would prepare me for this role, and it did. But not really. There's so much more behind the scenes work that I didn't fully appreciate when I was on council that I have a much deeper and better understanding of now. We set out with 4 very clear priorities: strong neighborhoods, safe streets, secure incomes, and sound government. And I talk about these things repeatedly because there are so many things that you are thrown in this role that it's very important to make sure that you have your priorities and can try to maintain, keep your eye on the ball. So I'm going to talk about each of those 4 priorities and the progress we made and some of the challenges along the way. So first, strong neighborhoods. We have successfully recruited and hired a director of neighborhood engagement. Her name is Milzy Carrasco. She is fantastic. It is a brand new position in city government, and it has been wonderful to have her on board. We have neighborhood groups that are meeting across the city. Some of them are very well formed, some of them are newly forming, some of them are not talking about necessarily forming an organization, but they know that they have issues in their neighborhood and they want help. And Milzy is basically coordinating all of the resources that we have in city government to bring to the table efficiently to be able to resolve some of those issues. One of the things that came up almost immediately were housing issues. And John referenced that there's been a few challenges that I've had in the first 6 months, and one of them culminated in an arson. And so I'll just talk about sort of what happened before that and sort of what has come after. It's not possible to walk through the city of Lancaster, which I did for like the better part of last year, and not notice the differences block to block in terms of how houses are maintained and managed. So when I'm walking down South Ann Street and I'm knocking on doors and noting house numbers, like I need to follow up with this house about this, you know, the porch or the condition of what's on the porch or the amount of trash that's at this house, you quickly understand that there's something that's amiss, because many of these properties are rental properties. So someone else is owning this property and they're not living there, and I don't even know if they know what the condition of the property is in. So when I came into office, the middle of February, we had our first housing work group meeting, and I asked for a list of names of problematic landlords. Who wasn't responding to the code violations? Who did we always have to be prodding to do the right things? And then I also asked the police for where were our problem blocks? Where were we repeatedly responding to calls? Where was our drug task force working? And so we started to do some mapping of that data. And it quickly came to me that there was one particular property owner whose name I just kept hearing over and over again. First, it was a house on Pershing Avenue that was shut down in a drug raid. Second was a house on Queen Street that had raw sewage in the basement. That house was condemned and shut down. Then it was a house fire on South Ann Street in which a gentleman died. Dana Bear is his name. Subsequently came known after the fire that he didn't actually die from the fire. He was actually had been deceased in that home for hours before the fire happened, but we did not know that. So when this starts happening, you kind of have to stop and, okay, what is going on here? What other houses does this person own? What are we doing about that? And if something else happens to another person who lives in one of those houses, and I knew there was a problem, there would be no sleeping at night for me. And so we embarked on this process of gaining administrative warrant and going out and finding conditions in these houses that no one should be living in. Was that process entirely smooth? No. Could we have done some things better? Yes. Did we ultimately find out that these houses were being operated as illegal rooming houses, and we were walking into 10 by 10 bedrooms that were padlocked, that had 5 mattresses on the floor, that had electrical panels that were unsecured, that had multiple things plugged into one outlet. I mean, roofs that had massive holes in them. All of this was happening right under our nose because these were not registered as rental properties. So we did something about it. In the midst of doing something about it, we had a very contentious city council meeting. I got a call at 4:07 a.m. that City Hall had been set on fire and one of our cars had been firebombed. And that began a very intense set of weeks for myself, my family's safety, for our employees and their sense of safety coming to work every day. We had this guy sitting out front of City Hall, just sitting there I took as an act of intimidation. There's just a lot that was happening behind the scenes. Well, lo and behold, it turns out that this person that, everybody thought had done it, did it. And now he's been arrested. And through that process, when I signed the paperwork, I remember very distinctly signing the court order about that. It wasn't just that they addressed the safety concerns, but there were zoning issues that we had to make sure that everybody that was living in those houses got better housing. So we raised $20,000 of private money. We worked in partnership with an incredible cast of organizations and individuals to make sure that every person that lived in that house that wanted our help got it. that meant that we are still in the process of rehousing those individuals. And I'll just tell you about one family, Mrs. Chambers. Mrs. Chambers is a mother of 5. They were living in that bedroom with 5 mattresses on the floor. She never thought that she was going to be in an apartment again where she would ever have a bathroom, a kitchen, and a washer and dryer. These are luxuries that we take for granted every single day. We moved her into her apartment a couple of weeks ago, and she can't believe it because now all of her family can live, like all of her kids are in the same house. Before, 2 of them were living someplace else. There is a stability in her life. We've been able to get her a new job closer to where she lives. And this is the kind of effort that it has taken us in partnership with a lot of social service organizations to do what? To strengthen our neighborhoods. Mrs. Chambers is fully invested in the neighborhood where she lives now. She's happy to be there, happy to be in a safe space. And that is what the work of Strong Neighborhoods is about. Because it is not just about the physical aspects of a neighborhood. Yes, we have plans for doing street paving, park improvements, tree planting, sidewalk repairs. All of those things are super important, but also important are the people who live in our neighborhoods. And they deserve, at a minimum, to have a house in which there is a functioning plumbing, electrical that's safe, smoke detectors that will keep them from harm's way. These are very, very low baseline things that we have to take care of. And so that's what we're focusing on, and we're going block by block by block. And that's the only way I know how to get this done. And I also know that we can't do it by ourselves. And so as a result, some of the calls that we're now receiving and letters are telling us, hey, you need to check out this house, because now people actually believe that we're going to do something about it. And that has been the biggest hurdle that we've cleared, is that people actually now believe that we're going to address it. And it doesn't matter if you try to burn down City Hall, we're still coming. So that has been a huge benefit. You know, there's always a silver lining out of something tragic that happens, and I would say that has been the silver lining in that situation. Do I ever want to go through that again? Absolutely no way. It was incredibly stressful. But we've come out on the other side of it. We've learned some really important lessons, and we are continuing to work on building strong neighborhoods. So that's priority number 1. And that work is just going to continue, because there's always just going to be problem properties, problem tenants too, that we need to be addressing in our neighborhoods. The second priority is really around safe streets. And if you've heard me talk about this, you know that it's about people, bikes, and cars in that order. And you also know that if you drive through the city of Lancaster, there's a lot more people and walking, a lot of more people on their bicycles, and there's a lot more cars. And so how do we strike a balance to make sure that we are ensuring everyone's safety? And so we are partnering between Public Works and our police bureau on identifying some critical blocks where there's conflict between cars, bikes, people, to make sure that we're doing the kind of public education, but also safety improvements that can move the needle to make sure that people have safe passage through the city. So Safe Streets is definitely part of that. It's also now not just about the streets, but it's also about public safety. So take 2, which is the second major hurdle that we are working our way through, which was a tasing incident that happened at the end of June that garnered international and national media attention. How many of you have seen that video? Just raise your hand. Okay. That was of great concern. I mean, the way that our police bureau is trained and how we respond and use force is the ultimate, right? This is how we live in a society of laws, is also how we police and use force. So there's a balance there. There's a balance between ensuring an officer's safety, and there's also a balance in ensuring public trust and not using force in ways that is inappropriate. So that has led to a really rich and robust conversation, and also painful one, about how our community interacts with our police and vice versa. That is yielding a change in our use of force policy, a commitment to implementing body cameras that will be piloted this year and rolled out in 2019 for every member of our police bureau. We have 143 uniformed police officers. We're having another conversation about how do we increase the diversity of our police bureau, because it is very important that we have more individuals on our police force that look like the community that they serve. Our community is 40% Latino, 20% African American. We have a huge number of refugees. You're just talking about 2 young men who are refugees from Congo. Our community is very diverse, and so how are we training and preparing the young men and women who are going out on the streets to serve us and protect us to interact and understand how community is different from different cultural lenses. The last part of that is really developing a strategy around community engagement. Our police bureau does an incredible job at reaching out and doing a lot of things in the community, and most of us don't know it. And so we have to do a better job of communicating the ways in which our police officers, I mean, my husband Christian and I went on a run on Christmas morning, and there was a sergeant delivering packages to a family on the street that we were running down on Christmas morning. As an example, the men and women of the police bureau are very, very dedicated to what they do, and they care deeply about the city. And one incident like this, one decision made by an officer, does not the story tell. However, it does not mean that we do not need to address that and talk about how we can do more and better and different, so that we are strengthened as a community and not talking over each other. Those few weeks after the tasing incident, I mean, I'll tell you, I've never received more hate mail. I've never received hate mail, but now I have. And it was largely from people who don't live here. So I was getting, and I just got a message this past week from a guy in Michigan. Hey, you never responded to what you're going to do about addressing this incident. And I was like, hey, you don't read Lancaster Online, do you? Because if you had access to Lancaster newspapers or were following city council, you would know the things that I'm doing. And by the way, you live in Michigan. Okay. But the degree to which people have called and reached out and want to help and want to have a conversation that is that's productive and not yelling at each other has not been so much. And I think that speaks to the level of civility and how I want to show up in a conversation, because I can tell you, if you're yelling at me, I'm not hearing you. It just doesn't work. And I would bet money that if somebody's yelling at you, you can't hear them either. And so I have really made it a point that I can take, you need to express whatever it is you need to express. Okay. But if you can't move on from that, and there's a lot of people who have been sending me this hate mail that are not moving on. But the people in our community, I feel we have this moment, this opportunity to do something really different. And we're doing it. We're having the kinds of conversations that need to be had. We're listening to one another. There's a vulnerability to this conversation because we all come with our own stuff. And that I find inspiring and very rewarding. And for all the hate mail and all the rest of it, that is so worth it. And so I'm really appreciative. And that conversation, that just needs to go on. Like, we can't stop having this conversation. And if communities think that they can just pretend this stuff isn't going to happen, it's a fool's errand to not think that this is going to affect all of us in some way. So that's second priority around safe streets. Third is around secure incomes. And if you read that little bio, the first sentence sort of tells it all about my own family history and loss of job and losing, our house and all the rest of it when I was growing up. And that doesn't ever go away. And I actually think that there are these things that happen to us in our childhoods that have an outsized impact on our life. And so as I look back on that part of my life, which was very painful and that I don't really like to talk about, to what I'm doing now, there's a direct correlation. We have an unemployment rate in this county that is amazing. It did just tick up a little bit, I read. But we also have employers who cannot fill all the jobs that they have available. I have employers telling me that they have in total between 8,000 and 10,000 jobs available in the county on a monthly basis. And they can't fill them. And they're concerned about not only filling for jobs for today, but also how are we addressing jobs for tomorrow. So under secure incomes, it's like we're dealing with a 40% poverty rate in some parts of our city. I know families who are working poor, like they are working 2-3 jobs, and they are not making it. And then there's these jobs out here, and they can't get here. Not only can they not get out there because there's no transportation to the job, but they can't stop working to get the training they need to make it's like a gerbil wheel. Like, how do you get off of this? So we've convened a group, the Chamber of Commerce, EDC, the Community Action Partnership, Assets, and the Workforce Development Board to just come together to plan how to set the table to have a bigger conversation about these things. On Monday, a delegation from Lancaster went to Pittsburgh and talked to them about some of the ways that they are integrating workforce development and economic development in something they call the Allegheny Conference, which is a 10-county. It's way bigger than what we're trying to do. There are a lot of lessons that came out of that. And there's a lot that I see here in Lancaster that we can do better to make the connection. It's like we have these wheels that are turning, but they don't touch one another. So they're not generating additional energy in terms of how are we training in our workforce and how are we preparing workers for jobs of tomorrow. It's kind of astonishing to think about the jobs that we know today. By the time my daughter is an adult, most of those jobs won't exist anymore, or they will be different. And she's 12. And so we're on this rapid technological pace. And so how are we preparing people here in Lancaster County? How are we connecting the individuals in Lancaster City that want something more? They want to climb the economic ladder to be able to do that and meet our private sector's needs. And so that is a conversation that is starting to come together. It's not going to happen overnight. But one of the really practical things that's happening that I'm really excited about is we have this conversation about transportation. We're sitting in a room with business leaders who are having this struggle, who have businesses sort of in the northwest part of the county. And Tom is sitting there from the chamber, and I'm there, and I'm like, you run a logistics company. Isn't this like a logistics problem? Like, can we figure out what the shifts are and how many people are coming from Lancaster City and coming from Reading? And how can we build our own transportation system? Because the other thing that I've learned in this job is there is nobody that's going to come and do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And so what is the private sector, it's a public-private model to be able to connect the people who live in Lancaster City to the jobs that are at Four Seasons and High Concrete and Pepperidge Farms. There's like 5,000 jobs that are in that neighborhood. So how can we literally create a system to get people there? Because if you're trying to fill positions on third shift, you can get people to third shift, but you can't ever get them home. There's no way on public transportation to get back into the city when your shift ends if you're working third shift. What? Like, we are not helping ourselves. So how can we make those connections better? So that's the third thing that I'm working on. This is so far out of what Lancaster City government does, by the way. We're like sewer, water, police, fire, not really trying to figure this out. But what I know is that the city of Lancaster and our success and the county's success are integrally linked. And when I talk to somebody and they say to me, oh, I don't pay that much attention to Lancaster City politics, and I bet you don't pay much attention to what's happening in the county. Wrong answer. We have to be paying attention to one another because we will rise and fall together. If the city was not as strong as it is now, the county would not be either, and vice versa. And so I want you all to care about what's happening in the city, and I care about what's happening outside of the city because that's hugely important for me. Transportation issues, big deal in terms of how we're growing as a county. How are we going to address that? So you get the idea. Last but not least is sound government. We've hired a new chief of police. We've hired a new fire chief. I'm really excited about both of those positions and the individuals that are filling them. We're in the process of looking at long-term planning related to our fire stations. They have outlasted their useful lives. If you want to come visit, let me know. They were built at a time when engines were smaller and there was not nearly the kind of safety protocols for turnout gear and things like that. So we're working really hard to put together a capital plan for that. We've also just secured a breathtaking amount of bond funding, $113 million, to work on. 70 million of that is for water, 20 for sewer. We have some general stuff that's in there, and then we have another 10 to 15 that's for stormwater. If you didn't read the paper or you missed it, we're also under an EPA consent decree. So we are dealing with that on top of everything else. Just over the weekend, we had a break in one of our sewer pipes, two of them actually, one 18-inch, one 36-inch, developed a sinkhole on South Duke Street that could swallow a dump truck. Yay, that's another bill to pay. And because these were brick, not, we've upgraded from some of the wooden ones, but brick pipes, like this is what we're talking about. Like, we have a city that was founded in 1730, and it's an archaeological dig every time we go underground in terms of what we're going to find. And so it's just a constantly, we'll never keep up because we're so far behind. So that $113 million, that's a breathtaking amount of money to take out on loan. But if we're going to continue to move the city forward and maintain a basic level of services, we have to be investing in our infrastructure. Also on sound government, we're preparing for my first budget. I sort of I know how the budget process works because I was chair of the finance committee. It's a whole other thing on the inside. So it's a 6-month planning process to figure out, and that process is basically started now. I'm really humbled to work with the people that I do every day. Your public servants in the city of Lancaster are dedicated professionals. They, by and large, they come in and they keep the city running 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. And the jobs they do are so varied. But I just feel so fortunate to have the chance to work alongside of them and the opportunity to lead. It's very humbling, and so that as soon as I walked in the door, you sort of feel it because all eyes are on you. Their expectations of like, are you gonna help us, or is this going to be more difficult? And my job is really to help them do their jobs even better. And I had a chance to go out and meet with all the employees, visit all of the places where they work, and I'm going to keep doing that because it's really important. We have 570 staff. I'm never going to know all of their names, but I want them to know who I am and what I'm about. The second observation that I've had is that this is a pure leadership position. I don't think I've never been in a job like this before. I don't have a deliverable. I was talking to a new friend that I've made. We were talking about in our previous lives, we were consultants. We had things to deliver. I just make decisions and read and ask questions and try to understand, all the different perspectives and to be able to move something forward. I don't have to write reports or memos, or it's a very strange experience. But you don't have time to think about it, and that's my third observation. I'm not exactly sure how Mayor Gray did this for 12 years, but this pace is kicking my butt. I'm amazed at how fast the weeks are flying by and how full they are, and the number and interesting conversations that I have with people about a whole host of things, from anything from the Rose Garden in Buchanan Park to, sludge disposal. I mean, it's just like, it's everything. And I really appreciate and value the diversity of that. And I think, these 7 months it has been a whirlwind. And I always just come back to, for me, I think, and John mentioned this at the beginning, and I appreciate that it's obvious to some people. When people ask me, well, what's next for you, Danene, or, you're just doing this to move on to the next thing. No, I'm not actually. I'm not making a move. I'm not doing this job to get me to the next place. And that is liberating, because it means that I can just make the decisions that I think are in the best interest for the community in which I live, in which we're raising our family, in which I am honored to serve. And I don't have to think about the rest of it, because it's not a priority and it doesn't matter to me. And it means that I can stay whole in this process and not worry about a lot of the other noise. And that, I wish that I could convince people. Like, I say that and people are like, yeah, right. But it's real, like, that's really what it is. And so I'm just gonna keep doing my job and doing it the best that I can, knowing that I have so much support and a lot of goodwill in the community, despite all of the, I'm not gonna be perfect, we're gonna make mistakes. But when you just meet that with, okay, we screwed up, what do we got to do different? We can move on from there. So I'll stop talking now, and I'll be happy to take any questions, and I thank you all for joining me for lunch today.